Welcome to another and our first extra time episode of the Blues Brothers podcast, a show that discusses all things football and, of course, Chelsea FC, made by the fans for the fans. I'm George Harris and joined as ever by co-host Charlie Patrick. And today we welcome another very special guest, currently living stateside as an NBC studio host for the Premier League and Olympic Games. We are delighted to welcome Rebecca Lowe to the show. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us. We realise that time's against us.
How are you doing? Sorry, I'm losing a little bit. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, I can. Well, looks beautiful where you are, and we're so grateful that you're here to share with us today with the fans. I know we're pushed for time, so to kick things off, Rebecca, we just wanted to know, football or soccer, should I say, out in the States, how is it perceived out there in the Premier League as a model in particular? Because I know you obviously do a lot of work on the telly for the Premier League. I mean, does it get as much traction and following from the fans and what they think about the season currently?
It's massive, guys. I'm not going to lie. When I first moved here 8.5 years ago, I wasn't really sure what I was walking into. I wasn't sure if there was going to be many viewers. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a thing. And when I first arrived, I was surprised at the amount of fans, at the viewing figures, and also the depth of knowledge, which I would go so far as to say is as good as fan space in the UK, if not better at times. And a lot of that's to do with, if you're a Premier League fan in America, you have to really work hard over the last 20 or so years to be a fan. And so let's say you're a Chelsea fan, you've got to be committed. You can't just be a sort of fair weather Chelsea fan. You've got to know your club, and you've got to work at knowing your club and look to where all the games are being on each weekend over the course of the last 10 to 20 years. So these fans really know their stuff. That was when I first arrived. Now, here we are in 2021, and we're breaking records a lot during the season in terms of well over 1 million viewers. We have these fan fests, which I'm about to do one in LA, which is going to be amazing, where I think the last one that we had booked was in Philadelphia just as the pandemic started. So we had to cancel it, but we had 26,000 people who were going to come to the fan fest. And all that is like us taking the show on the road and putting on a load of fun of things around the show. And that's just, it's not even a live game of football. And there was 26,000 people coming before the pandemic hit. We've done them in Boston. We've done them in New York, Washington, Austin, Miami Beach. So we're now heading to LA, and we're expecting thousands again. So to answer your question, I see football shirts everywhere. When I first arrived, it was sporadic. Now it's a weekly thing, if not a daily thing.
Would you say, like, then obviously, because the big things over in America, you know, the NFL, the NBA, probably Major League Baseball as well, would you say that it's kind of, are those still the dominant ones in America, or would you say the Premier League is now kind of sort of working its way up to being that kind of level?
I think, Charlie, it's working its way. It's definitely not. I mean, the NFL is like a juggernaut that you ain't stopping anytime soon. The NBA is a little lower underneath NFL. And then you've got Major League Baseball, which I would say is the most traditional of American sports. It's the oldest, I think. And it's sort of maybe a generational thing. That is not really attracting the kids. Baseball isn't really packed stadiums full of like 8-year-olds. They all want to watch the soccer. Or football, I should say. Ice hockey is the fourth, but I would say the Premier League challenges ice hockey. So I would say it's getting up there as the fourth most, well, it's definitely the fourth most popular, I think, sport in the States. It's the most played sport in the States. And parents love it, of course, because there's very little problems with head injuries like there is with the NFL. And kids playing American football is really like, I have a 5-year-old boy, and I'm not putting my 5-year-old boy anywhere near American football. Thanks. So I think it's getting there, boys, but it's really going to take a generation. So all of the kids now that I see playing football are all wearing Premier League shirts, like the 8-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, the 10-year-olds. But when they get to like 28, that's when I think a real shift will happen. I think a little shift has happened and it's continuing, but give it another 20 years. It's going to be a slow burn, but it's going to get up there because it's the world's sport. I mean, we can't get away from it. Everywhere else absolutely loves it. And America, I've always said, when it starts to wake up to football, it's going to be a beast. And it is starting to wake up now, for sure.
I mean, the States is such a powerhouse in terms of sports, and we see a lot of American owners who are invested in Premier League sides. I mean, could you ever see, because I've seen the traction, you know, the news going around, could you ever see the Premier League fixtures ever being in America? Because we've obviously had the NBA at the O2 Arena in London. We've had NFL fixtures at Wembley and more recently at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I mean, could you really see Premier League fixtures being played out the States? And would that be the next step, do you think, in getting people on side in the States?
I think, George, fixtures plural, probably not. Fixture, maybe. One or two, maybe. And it's all down to money. I mean, let's be honest, it's all about money. So if the American owners decide that's the route they want to take, then they'll do it. And they'll, by the way, all you need is 14 to 6 vote in the Premier League in terms of ownership. And we're getting up to 14 American owners at this rate. So American owners are starting to take over, and then you're going to see that become a possibility. I think we're quite a way away from it. I think obviously football in England is much more, say, traditional. It's like a religion, as we know. And to do that to the fans, I think is going to take a lot. I mean, I really think, you saw what happened with the Super League. You saw when Richard Scudamore mentioned the 39th game, 10 years ago, I think, he got lambasted for it, because football is just such a tradition. It's so old-fashioned in so many ways. Whereas in this country, the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, I mean, these clubs move cities, like literally move cities. And then they expect the new fans. So if you're a fan of, I think it's the LA Rams. It might be the LA Rams. It's a team down in the south of California anyway. They've now moved to Las Vegas. And it's like, well, what happens to all those fans? So that's just a thing in America. They can do that. They move cities. It's a bit random, to be honest. But you could obviously, can you imagine, Man United are moving to London? I mean, it's just never going to happen. So the viewpoint in America is different from England. They do look at things differently. So they would see nothing wrong with having a Premier League game here. But I think English fans would see a lot wrong. So I think that would be a big battle ahead.
And you mentioned, obviously, there's quite a lot of American owners in the Premier League now, the likes of the Cronkies at Arsenal, got FSG at Liverpool, etc. What is it, do you think, that attracts American businessmen to a Premier League football club? Because a lot of them are often multiple owners, in terms of they'll own an NFL club and then they go and buy a Premier League team. What is it about a Premier League team that is attractive to these businessmen?
It's interesting. I think it's the thrill, because we have a division where there's relegation. And even though I know United and Liverpool are probably not going to be ever relegated ever, it's still a thrill that they don't have in America. That's one of the things. The other thing is that if you're an owner of an NFL team, you can trade players, but it's not like it is where you can buy and sell players in the UK. So you can make money. I mean, let's be honest, you can make money out of football. It doesn't happen very often, and it certainly doesn't happen mid-table. But if you're buying a top 10 team, you can make money. So it's a cynical view, but I think money is a big thing. And it's a real toy that you can play with. There's so many restrictions in NFL and NBA and MLB that doesn't make it as easy, as flexible. But if you're an owner of a football club, you're basically the king, aren't you? Let's be honest. You can literally do what you want, as we've seen. And that's why a lot of them get into trouble. But from a billionaire's perspective, wow. I mean, how fun is that? It's just so fun.
And in terms of, the Super League obviously didn't go down well. A lot of, fans in England, particularly Arsenal fans, don't particularly like the Cronkies at all. United fans have, over the years, generally been quite anti the Glazers until they bring Ronaldo back, and it's all right for a little while. But, what's the American fans, the American Premier League fans? How do they look at these American owners? Do they look at them in the same way that the British fans do? Or do you say there's a slightly different look, different perspective on it?
I think it's a slightly different perspective, Charlie, to be honest. I think that a lot of the American fans listen to their British counterparts and understand their gripes, especially, say, the United fans. I had a lot of messages from American-based United fans who are very angry with the ownership and the Glazers, but they're not quite as fervently angry, because I don't think they feel it affects them quite as much as it affects the British-based fan. And also, it goes back to this religion, really, that football is. I mean, you cut us all open. We bleed our club's colours, and I think that is a very English thing. The American fan, this is a perfect example for you. When we do a fan fest, guys, it's, there's beer, there's all sorts going on, and you've got Chelsea fans next to West Ham fans, next to United fans, next to Liverpool fans, next to Leeds fans, and they're all loving each other. There's no animosity. The American Premier League fan doesn't have that edge that the British Premier League fan has, just from culture. It's like going to an NFL team. You don't chant like you do in England. So it's a really different culture. So from that perspective, they don't really have the anger in them. They understand. They understand. I'm not excusing what some owners have done, but American Premier League fans understand the cultural difference that I think is the problem mainly when you look at some of the owners. But the American Premier League fan get it because they're American, and so they're not as angry about it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. We probably should have done this first, Rebecca, but can you just give us a little insight for the fans listening today about your journey? Because you obviously came from the UK, moved to the States, and have now got into the presenting world. I mean, just give, if you could, a screenshot for people who may be looking to get into presenting and why you chose to move to the States and how that's worked out for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, screenshot is graduated from university, wanted to be an actress. And as I was trying to get myself an agent, I entered a competition. So I'm to do this. I entered a competition which was run by the BBC in 2002, and the prize was a 6-month contract on Football Focus, Match of the Day, and Final Score as a reporter for 6 months. And I always loved football. My dad took me to Selhurst Park growing up, and I'm a massive Palace fan. So I was trying to get an agent, trying to be an actress. And my friend said to me, "Oh, look, it was literally on the back of a cornflakes packet, right? This competition." She's like, "You love football. Why don't you apply?" I was like, "Well, I'm never going to win that. I'm a girl. I'm a woman." It's like 2002. We're still in the dark ages. Anyway, I did apply. And back then, luckily for me, BBC were starting to be quite politically correct. And I won. And so then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a 6-month contract on Football Focus. I can't turn that down. I guess I'll give it a go. So I started my career as a 21-year-old fresh out of uni, and I was on Final Score within 5 weeks, reporting live from Nottingham Forest against Reading. And I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. I hate this. But I stayed and I carried on, and I ended up doing Radio 5. I was about 3 or 4 years on Football Focus and Final Score, Radio 5 Live, BBC News 24. Went to Setanta Sport to do what was called the Blue Square Premier, which is now the National League, I think, as a pitchside reporter and FA Cup presenter. And then I went to ESPN UK, and I was the pitchside reporter for the Premier League coverage. And I presented the FA Cup final for them and all the England under-21 games. And then I was kind of fed up, and I was kind of thinking, it wasn't really changing for women. And I was struggling against a lot of the problems that I experienced, whether it be the fans or some managers, various things which were making it hard to be a woman in football. So I was very close to giving up. And then my agent called me out of the blue in the final year of my contract with ESPN and said, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I've just had a call from NBC. They've won the rights to the Premier League, and they want me to fly over and talk about you moving to America to present it." And I literally fell off my chair. I was like, "I'm sorry, what? You mean as a pitchside reporter?" He said, no, as a presenter. Okay, so the rest is history. I moved over in 2013. My husband was actually manager of Luton Town at the time. He'd just taken Luton to the 5th round of the FA Cup, and he was doing brilliantly. And I was like, really sorry. And he left. He resigned as manager of Luton and came with me, which is amazing. And we've been here ever since. And we live in California, and it's beautiful, and life's pretty good. And it's weird though. You can come very close to giving up, and then something happens and changes your life forever.
It certainly looks like a great life out there. Just one last thing I wanted to ask before we wrap up. You mentioned an important point there about, how women working in football, it's been quite daunting in the past, quite hard, a lot of issues to overcome. It's great to see now that there's been a real push, and there's a lot more women, reporting, working on the men's game, etc. We've got the likes of Ian Wright championing the women's game as well. How difficult has it been, as a woman working in football, and how much better is it now, and how much further do you feel we still have to go?
It's a really good question. It's been really difficult. I would say that is the reason why I came very close to giving up, without a doubt. Because in 2012, when I was having these thoughts about leaving, that's a long time ago, guys. It's nearly 10 years ago. And we've come very far in 10 years. In the landscape when I was the pitchside reporter, so it was Jeff Shreves for Sky and me for ESPN. And there was Gabby Logan, and there was Claire Tomlinson, and there was Jackie Oatley, and then that was basically it. And it was tough. And I had many times where the abuse from the stands was the worst. I remember one game at the Emirates, Arsenal against Leeds in the FA Cup. It was the game, remember, when you guys are probably too young, but Thierry Henry came back and re-signed for Arsenal. for like a random 6 months. And he played his first game back, and it was that game in the FA Cup. I think it was FA Cup 5th round or something, and he scored. Anyway, our pitchside desk was right in front of the Leeds fans. Great, let's do our pitchside desk in front of 6,000 travelling Leeds fans. And I had hot dog thrown at my head, a coin. I was with Robbie Savage, and this gives you an example. It was Robbie Savage and Martin Keough. And the abuse that I was taking from the fans was so bad that even Robbie Savage said to me, "Are you okay? Like, are you okay? This is bad." I was like, "Yeah, I know. Welcome to my world. Like, this is just horrible, guys." So there was that. Plus, there was there was a generation of managers who are not really there anymore, or if they are, they've improved, I have to say, who just didn't respect me at all. Asked to see my questions before I'd interview them. Told me that I couldn't ask some questions. Told me what I could ask and what I couldn't ask. It was really tough. So that was really hard. Having said that, when I look at England now, I can't believe it. I cannot believe how much it's changed. There's so many women. It's incredible. I feel like I hope I played some part in allowing those doors to be opened. And I was actually one of the founder members of Women in Football, which is now a huge thing in the UK. I was one of the founding members at Pizza Express in central London back in like 2004 with a handful of women. And I think that that's an institution now that really helps women get into football and stay in football. But it has been really hard. I'm glad I stuck at it. This country is different. I would say this country is different. There are more women on television because there are more mainstream sports and there are more networks. And so it's not as weird to see females working in sport. There aren't that many hosts, presenters. There are a lot of reporters. I would like them to see more hosts. I want to make sure, and I really feel passionately that, we give the women opportunities who are good enough. Let's not just do it because they're women. I don't want a job because I'm a woman. I want a job because I'm good enough to do the job. Otherwise, you're taking the whole thing backwards if you start doing reverse discrimination. So I'm really, really passionate about that. I mentor about 5 women, both in the UK and the US. So I'm really trying to help women come through with what I believe is the right advice on how to be a woman in this industry, because it isn't easy. It's getting better, but we've still got, for me, I have a stepson who's 24 and he grew up watching the likes of Gabby Logan. So it's not weird for him to see women on television, but he's only 24. Once my stepson's generation gets to like the chief exec age, so like 55, I think that's when that change might happen. So for me, we're still at least another generation away from it being where it should be.
No, it's fascinating insight. Just one final thing. If people, want to find out more about your work, follow more of the stuff that you do, where's the best place for them to go and check you out?
Well, I'm not a massive social media fan. I did get pressurized finally into joining Instagram. So I am on Instagram. My handle is Rebecca Lowe TV. And that, I guess I do a little bit of that. Other than that, guys, you can't really find me. So yeah, Instagram is the way forward. Rebecca Lowe TV, that's where I am. I try to remain kind of off there a little bit because it can take over your life. But that is where I do a lot of behind the scenes on the show and Olympics and all different stuff. So yeah, that's where it is.
What an inspiring story to finish on as well, Rebecca. So thank you so much. Any female listeners out there who are listening to the podcast and want to get into broadcasting, presenting, particularly in sport, then Rebecca, you are the pinnacle of that. So thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to speak to you again soon in greater length, perhaps on another episode. But my thanks as always to Charlie Patrick, co-host, special guest Rebecca Lowe, and I've been your host, George Harris, today. So thank you for tuning into the Blues Brothers podcast for yet another episode.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Really appreciate it.
No worries. Send me tag me on you guys are on Instagram because you're young and happening. So tag me on Instagram and then I can, repost it and stuff.
Yeah, wicked. Thanks very much. Cheers. Take care.
Yeah. No worries. Bye, guys.
Bye.